without further ado, I am so excited to introduce this evening's speaker. Nancy Jo Sales is an author and longtime journalist for Vanity Fair and The Guardian, her 2016 book, American Girl, Social Media and the Secret Lives of Teenagers, was a New York Times bestseller. We are so excited to have Nancy here with us this evening to give us some insight into this world of social media that our teens seem to live in. Thank you so much, Nancy. Take it away.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me here. I thought I would start by reading you the beginning of a story that appeared in the Washington Post, so just very recently, like a week or two ago. This was a story about new games that are appearing in the virtual reality space in the metaverse. These are games put out by Meta, which of course owns Facebook and Instagram. And this is the lead of this story. Zach Matheson, 28, sometimes worries about the hostility in Meta's virtual reality-powered social media game Horizon Worlds. When his 7-year-old son, Mason, explores the app, he encounters users, often other children, screaming obscenities or racist slurs. He is so uneasy about his son that he monitors his every move in VR through a television connected to his Quest headset. When Matheson decides a room is unsafe, he'll instruct Mason to leave. He frequents online forums to advise other parents to do the same. A lot of parents don't really understand it at all, so they just usually leave it to the kids to play on there, he said. He will say, if your kid has an Oculus, I think those are the virtual reality headsets, please try to monitor them and monitor who they're talking to. Well, number one, that sounds exhausting. Zach cannot monitor his 7-year-old Mason all the time. And number two, I wonder if Zach has seen Mason, a 7-year-old, experience children hearing racist slurs and obscenities in this space. Why is Mason even still playing this game? You know, I applaud Zach for his monitoring, but I really think he should step back and think about, why is his son even playing this game? And as someone who has reported on social media for over 10 years, I feel like I'm experiencing deja vu all over again, as they say, with the advent of the next step in all of this, which is virtual reality. Experiencing deja vu all over again, in that we are once again seeing children being used as guinea pigs for this new technology. And the adverse effects are already becoming apparent. And yet people are saying, well, what should we do? What can we do? How can we fix this? You know, our kids want it. We're just the parents. What are we supposed to do about it? All the other kids have it. They won't have friends if they don't have it. This is what I've been hearing for 10 years. And what has happened in those 10 years? Well, let me just give you a little bit of my background, which is that I've been a journalist for a long time, almost 30 years, more than 30 years. And in around 2012, I, who am a journalist who has covered teens a lot and teen culture, I started to see that there were a lot of stories in the news about teens, especially girls, being very adversely affected by these platforms. And there were a lot of very famous suicides in the news, girls killing themselves because they had been cyberbullied, or, you know, cyberbullied to death. There's actually a word for it, cyberbullicide. And I wanted to do a story on one of these girls. And I went to my editor at Vanity Fair, the magazine where I worked, and he said, let's look at a broader, cast our net wider and see if there's something going on with this stuff that is beyond just like one girl here or one girl there, you know, getting really upset and having a problem. So I did. I wrote first a story in 2013 for Vanity Fair, which then became a book, American Girls. I spent 2.5 years about traveling all over the country, talking to over 250 girls about their experiences on social media. And this was girls of all races and socioeconomic backgrounds and 10 different states. And what was so striking about it was that the experiences of these girls and the stories they were telling me were so similar. And I began to realize that that is because the social media is the same wherever you go. And, you know, it's not that social media has no redeeming value. That's not what I'm saying or have ever said. But on the whole, I don't think it's a place for children or teenagers. And, you know, when my book first came out, I didn't really say that as bluntly as I would like to tell you now, because, you know, it was early days in terms of studying this stuff. I sort of like picked the bones of the internet for every study that had come out about it, and all of which were saying that this is alarming, this isn't good. But now in the last 10 years, there has just been an explosion of research and academic studies on social media and kids. And again, if you did a cost benefit analysis and the pros and cons of should they be on it or should they not be on it, the cons and saying they should not be on it so vastly outweigh the pros at this point that I really think that parents are the ones who have to step in and take control of this, and in their own homes, with their own children, in their schools, and also lobbying their government officials to put in place more rules and regulations about children's, you know, how these platforms are made and how, you know, how they affect children. Media literacy and monitoring screen time and all that just isn't cutting it anymore. That is what I myself even said, you know, in consultation with the publisher of my book, what should we say they should do? And I really felt at the time that they shouldn't be on it at all. And I'll tell you why that is more extensively in a moment. But, you know, it just seemed like a really extreme thing to say at that point, that they shouldn't use it. And I guess I was afraid, and we were afraid, that people wouldn't want to read a book that said that, because, and I wasn't even really sure, like, am I right? You know, there's not enough to go on really here, except my own research and analysis, which told me that. And I had a 12-year-old at the time, 2012, 13, and I never let her go on any social media or ever bought her a phone. She handled all that later when she was an adult, went to college and got a phone. And she thanks me now, because for one thing, she has an attention span, which a lot of her, you know, classmates and so forth are really struggling with, among other things. So I'm at the point now where I have to once again be the person saying something, you know, that's controversial, that people don't want to hear. And I find myself in that position a lot, because I can't help but tell the truth about this. I'm not somebody who is on the payroll of any social media company. I've been offered. Many, you know, tech executives have reached out to me and said, hey, let's partner on this, or let's partner on that. And I always feel like it's like a subtle way of saying, you know, come on board with us so that you don't keep telling people that we are toxic for children. But I've never taken any money or assumed any position with any social media company, because I think it's important that somebody be out there saying this, bearing witness. And I'm not the only one anymore. We are now in a teen mental health crisis, as I'm sure you've heard, you know, 10, 15 years after the advent of social media, and about 10 years of kids really using it. And I think it's only gotten worse with TikTok, because we were with images and pictures, and now we're with video. These platforms are, as you may already know, I might be telling you stuff you already know, because the information has become more widely disseminated and more widely available. But as a parent, I think, again, like Zach on the virtual reality space with his child, you have to ask yourself, well, if I know that this is bad for them, why am I still letting them use it? Because we do know that these platforms are designed to be addictive, and not just addictive. They are designed and on a premise called operant conditioning, which is the whole underlying mechanism of all social media addiction. And this is the core mechanism that is analogous to the role that alcohol plays in alcoholism. And it's that they get rewards. You know, you may have heard this already, dopamine spikes, rewards for success online, which is likes and, you know, comments and followers and views and all these bells and whistles that make their brain say, you did good, you know. But what do they do good for? What gets them likes? What gets them views? Well, we will go into that more in a second, but whatever it is that they're doing and that they're so addicted to is concurrent with the rise of a teen health crisis so severe that the US Surgeon General in December of 2022 called it a devastating mental health crisis among adolescents. Numerous hospital and doctor groups have called it a national emergency, citing rising levels of mental illness, a severe shortage of, this is another issue, is that at the same time, there's a shortage of therapists and treatment. Some people still argue that, you know, this is not definitively being caused by social media. Okay, but it's happened at exactly the same time that 95% of kids now across racial and socioeconomic lines now have smartphones, majority of them on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, Snapchat. 1 in 5 teens visit YouTube almost constantly, quote unquote. So at the same time that our children's time and energy and focus has been diverted to social media almost constantly, 2007 to 2016, emergency room visits for people aged 5 to 17 rose 117% for anxiety disorders, 44% for mood disorders, 40% for attention disorders. The number of ADHD diagnoses in the United States rose 39% from 2003 to 2016. What is different about this time frame? What has been introduced into the lives of kids that might be accounting for the rising rates of depression and anxiety? And when it comes to girls, which has been my focus largely, it's even worse, because we know that girls are more adversely affected by social media than boys. So in 2000, and this is pre-COVID, by the way, this is pre-COVID. This isn't something that we can just ascribe to the COVID crisis, during which time, yes, it got worse because they were on screens even more. But in 2019, 13% of adolescents reported having a major depressive episode, a 60% increase from 2007, which is when smartphones were introduced, iPhones and Androids, so shortly thereafter. Emergency room visits by children and adolescents in that period also rose sharply for anxiety, mood disorders, and self-harm. So, and for people ages 10 to 24, suicide rates stable from 2000 to 2007, that magical year, leapt nearly 60% by 2018. Okay, so let's just use our common sense and not fall into the marketing of tech or certain media that like to tell us like, oh, it's not really that. We don't really know that for sure. As parents, we have to err on the side of protection of children. We just do. And we know that. So you might say, well, it's not really for sure, and she or he really wants it, and I don't know how to say no. You're going to have to, if you want to protect your child. That's the new me in 2023, with all of this evidence that I can now speak about, telling you that your child needs your protection, because government isn't doing it. Tech companies aren't doing it. The parents are the last line of defense. You are the ones who buy this stuff. You are the ones who allow for it or not. And I don't think you can say anymore that you can just roll the dice here, because it's just gotten too dangerous. Let's talk more specifically about the dangers, which I did talk about in my book, American Girls, and they're all the same. The platforms, people often ask me, well, which platforms are better than others? Which ones are safe? None of them. I'm sorry, none of them are. They all have the same problems. Number one, in my opinion, being cyberbullying. Now, you might say, well, my kid's on social media and they've never been cyberbullied. That you know of. They don't all, children and teenagers don't always tell their parents when they've been cyberbullied, because they don't want their phones taken away, those things that they're so addicted to. They don't want to be taken off social media. Also, they don't necessarily have to be directly cyberbullied. They can just watch it. They can experience it through just watching it. It affects them that way too. That can cause anxiety and depression too. Just watching someone else be cyberbullied. Something like 90% of kids have seen someone else be cyberbullied, even if it wasn't them. There's this very hostile atmosphere on social media that I think as parents, we have experienced somewhat ourselves. I know I have. You know, women journalists are often, you know, really attacked on social media. I have been, but I see even, you know, the adults in my midst arguing with each other, being very cranky and, you know, unpleasant with each other. It's because the platforms are designed this way. They are designed to reward aggression. Anything I'm saying, by the way, I encourage you to pick up my book and read more about it, or just Google it, or go to my website and look at information and interviews about it. Everything I'm telling you has backup, and you can just Google it right there at home as I'm speaking. Go to Pew Research Center and Google effects of social media on kids 2022. This isn't stuff that just happened when I did my book in 2016. It's still happening now today. And what is happening? Oh, well, according to Pew, which is the very solid research company in this country, a majority of teens have experienced some form of cyberbullying. Nearly half of teens have experienced cyberbullying, with offensive name calling being the type most commonly reported. Offensive name calling, spreading of false rumors about them, receiving explicit images they didn't ask for. That's, you know, something that I was really the journalist who started to talk about very early on, is the non-consensual sharing of images and nude images. You know, I don't want to offend anybody by saying what they're called in the vernacular, but they have names. And it's when somebody doesn't think that they're going to see this image, but then it just pops up on their phone. My book, American Girls, starts out with the phrase, "send nudes," in quotes, because this was what a 13-year-old girl that I was interviewing, what happened to her. A boy in her class that she didn't even really know just said, "send nudes." And, you know, again, your 13-year-old doesn't always sit down to dinner with you and tell you that this has happened, because it's embarrassing, because they don't want their phone taken away, because they're freaked out and they don't know what to do. You know, because it's been normalized and they think that they should be okay with it. They should be okay with someone asking for a nude image of them, someone they don't even know. You know, even just today, on Facebook. Some woman that I don't really know that well commented on something I had posted, and it didn't even have anything to do with what I had posted. And she commented, "But teens are sexual and they need to express their sexuality." You know, okay, that is not ever something that I would argue against. That's true. What I'm talking about and the pitfalls of social media that I'm talking about are that this isn't some kind of healthy, organically arising out of their relationship with someone sort of situation. This is an objectifying, I would almost call it violent, if not harassing, demand for nudes. There's also this terrible pitfall of the non-consensual sharing of nudes. I don't even know how many times I've heard girls tell me that they've had nudes not consensually shared, you know, and it can be life ruining, life ending. You know, the 2012, when I first got into this subject matter, was when I found out about Amanda Todd, 15-year-old Canadian girl who had her nudes non-consensually shared by an older man she met online. And she was cyberbullied to death and killed herself. Her YouTube video where she did her suicide note is still there, hauntingly. So what else happens in cyberbullying? This isn't just someone saying like, nah, you're not, you know, whatever. Physical threats, having explicit images of them shared without their consent. Again, I'm reading from Pew about what type of cyberbullying teens were experiencing in 2022. Revenge porn, that's another thing. Kids, you know, date, break up. This technology has completely changed love, sex, and dating for adults as well as kids. Technology has really taken over and gotten in the way of the way that, again, we used to think of dating for kids. I was at a school in Long Island a few years ago. I give talks at schools. If you ever want me to come to your school, just ask me. My website has a contact form. And I said to the kids there, how many of you have ever had a nude, have ever been asked for a nude or sent a nude? Teachers were in the room, but I said, you know, teachers, look away. I want them to have the ability to just let me know. About half the kids raised their hands. That's about normal. Some studies say 5%. That's not right. Some say 90%. I don't think that's right either. I think Pew is right. It's about half. And then I said, okay, so they're dating through sending and receiving nudes. Okay, which we know has a lot of dangerous pitfalls. Okay, how many of you have ever started to get to know somebody, not by a nude, but by holding hands? Not one kid raised their hand, which I think is sad, because we know that true intimacy does not happen through the exchanging of sexual imagery, but through spending time together, through getting to know each other, through talking and walking and hanging out and doing all the things that we used to do to develop relationships. And this isn't just love and sex relationships. This is also just friendships. Body image. I was there from the jump, trying to tell parents that this is really, the social media platforms are really affecting their girls' body image. We know that they are. We know that they are. We know from Facebook's own internal research that they did in 2017 and suppressed until, and we didn't know about it until 2021, when Frances Haugen, the whistleblower, revealed that they very well knew that that 40% of girls on Instagram, which Facebook/Meta owns, reported feeling unattractive because of social comparisons they experience on the platforms. The proportion of girls that feel unhappy about the way they look rises considerably between the ages of 11 and 14. This is really a problem on TikTok. And again, please do your research. Please don't just take my word for it. Do your research, do your Googling. Just type in TikTok and body image or TikTok and body image in girls, and you will see the studies and you will see the reports. And I think what every parent has to ask themselves is, well, is this acceptable? Can I run this risk that my little girl will start to think she's ugly because she uses this app, or start to think she's less than, or start to think that she's too fat or too thin? I mean, again, I can't judge parents who are ignorant of this, but I do really question parents who know this and still allow for their children to use these platforms. I really wonder, like, why would you do that? Why is it an acceptable risk for you? And I would encourage, if it is, and I would encourage you, every parent needs to read this, is the APA, American Pediatrics Association Task Force on the Sexualization of Girls, which I talk about in my book, and you can just read online. And what is the problem? Okay, social media, this is the thing that I've been trying to talk about from the beginning, and this is the thing that always gets left out of these discussions about social media. I don't know why, because it's a huge problem. Social media rewards sexualization. I've had girls tell me, if I put up a picture or a video of myself like holding the math award, I get 3 likes. If I put up a picture of myself in a bikini, I get 300 likes. Well, if you're on a platform that, rewards, gives you a dopamine spike and makes you feel good, at least for that moment, but not down the road, why? Then you're going to do it. What is wrong with sexualization? Sexualization is not sex. So sexualization is not the same as sex. Sexualization is when, for girls, the reason why it's bad for them is because it too early and too powerfully tells them that their value comes from their sexual appeal or sexual behavior, to the exclusion of other characteristics. It tells them that a person is held to a standard that equates physical attractiveness, narrowly defined, with being sexy. A person is sexually objectified, that is made into a thing for others' sexual use, rather than as a person with the capacity for independent action and decision-making, and or sexuality is inappropriately imposed upon a person. Now, when we get into this thing of like, they're made into a thing for others' sexual use, this is another thing that a lot of people don't want to talk about, and isn't often in these discussions of why social media is bad, but it's such a huge issue. It's such a huge issue for kids, both girls and boys. And that is, I'm sorry, the problem of predators. And I don't just mean predators who are going to actually go out and meet them somewhere, although that does happen. And I'll read you something about that in a second. I'm talking about, when, and again, forgive me, this is uncomfortable, but it needs to be said. When your 16-year-old daughter or 13-year-old daughter or 12-year-old daughter puts a picture of herself on one of these platforms, or a video of herself on one of these platforms doing whatever in a sexualized manner, which again we've established is what gets likes, and that she's not even necessarily aware of, but she knows that she's copying somebody who gets lots of likes and views, some influencer who does it that way, so I'll do it that way too, because she may be aware, she may not be, but she's sexualizing herself because that is what is rewarded. Who do you think is looking at that? Who do you think is looking at that? Maybe some of her girlfriends, sure, who are just like, you know, cheering her on, but it's also people who use that image of her for their own use, if you know what I mean. And I don't think that's something we want for our daughters or sons. And, you know, how much of a problem is this? How much is it really happening? Well, I can tell you anecdotally that when I interview girls and I look at their followers, you know, they want more followers. They don't know all of them. I interviewed a girl in American Girls and she had like over 6,000 followers, which on Instagram, which at the time was like a lot for a teenage girl. Now it's not even a lot. And I said, do you know all these people? And she said, no. And I said, well, who are they? And she says, oh, I don't know, random dudes. She's a very, you know, a girl who sexualized herself online. And so she's got like, some of them weren't even in like English alphabet. They were like other countries' alphabets. So she doesn't know these people, and they're men, and they're looking at her. And I'm uncomfortable with that for my daughter. And I don't know why more people aren't for theirs. I think because they don't think about it. And I think because they don't think about it also because it's not in the media enough. It's not talked about enough, you know, but it's a real danger. I before this talk, I Googled online predators because you get accused of, being an alarmist and raising a moral panic and stranger danger and all that kind of stuff. No, it's real. And it's really a problem. These are statistics you can get online, and they're from reputable sources. As many as 500,000 predators on the internet pose a threat to kids daily. 1 in 25 children will be manipulated into physical contact within a year. Children aged 12 to 15 are the most targeted by online predators. 82% of the predators on the internet are male. The coronavirus pandemic has contributed to a rise in online enticement cases. Only 15% of parents are aware of what their kids do online. I'm glad they threw that in there because that's part of the issue. Social media is the place where over 80% of child sex crimes start. This is from law enforcement telling us this. Okay, so this is dangerous for your child. There are no regulations. There's less and less monitoring, if there ever was any, because now with the social media companies are kicking off their monitors right and left because they're losing money, and they, you know, employees cost money. It's uncomfortable to talk about. I don't want to be, you know, accused, as I have been in the past, of some kind of extremism around this issue. But my feelings about it come from sitting there and talking to girls, sometimes little girls, telling me about how somebody approached them online and they didn't know what to do. And yes, their parent had talked to them about it and said, if this ever happens to you, tell us, but they don't. And again, it's because it's an uncomfortable conversation to have with your kid, and they don't want to not be on social media. But even if they never go to meet that person, still, just to even have that interaction is really upsetting for them, traumatizing even, you know, and it happens more than you think. And the other thing that happens, that again, I apologize for raising an uncomfortable subject, but parents need to know there's a lot of child pornography online too, which your kids do see. Facebook flagged a staggering 73.3 million pieces of content under child nudity and sexual exploitation from 2022, up from 2021. Facebook isn't alone either. It's Instagram, YouTube, Twitter. Twitter is a terrible problem with child pornography. Just Google it. TikTok, Reddit, Snapchat, Discord, LinkedIn combined remove millions of posts and images that fall foul of community guidelines regarding child exploitation and child abuse. Lastly, they're not sleeping. Social media is robbing them of their very sleep, and it is destroying their ability to concentrate. If there's one thing I have heard over and over and over, going around the country talking to schools and guidance counselors know a lot because they see it in their office when the problems start, is that the kids can't concentrate. And I have in my mind more than one occasion when a school principal or an administrator will hold up a phone and say to me, these things are destroying our school because the kids can't concentrate. So tell me again why your kid is on social media and what's so good about it. People say, well, they won't have friends. I understand. I do understand that there is this overwhelming kind of pressure. That's why I think parents need to get real with what's really going on here and band together in their communities, in their schools, to help their children get off social media or to never have it at all if they're young enough to never have had it. It's not going to be easy, but I think there's no other choice, considering how dire the situation has become and how bad it is for them. I just don't see another. I appeal to you as parents to please protect your children and to please acknowledge that there is a problem here. What can you do? Well, here's what I've seen parents do in other schools and other communities. I've seen them, kids have these friend groups where there's a few of them all together, or just two best friends, or whatever. The parents get together and decide mutually, we won't have any social media in this group or any phones. The longer you can hold out, doctors tell us now, the American Pediatric Society tells us now, delay the phones, delay. Kids are getting phones now at 6, 8. That's insane. That's like this kid on virtual reality at 7. And, they're going to see stuff that they shouldn't see. They're going to experience stuff that they shouldn't experience. So I just think that parents need to kind of unite to protect their kids, because there are legislators that are trying to pass bills to raise the age limits and get social media companies to install real reliable age checks. But we're like over a decade in and they're not doing it. These social media companies are not doing it. They have no incentive to do it, at all. Your children are their guinea pigs. They need them. They need their time. They need their money. They need their data. They're just so happy that your kids are all on social media, if they are, so they're not going to do anything. And that's why I think parents have got to talk to their kids about why this isn't for us right now. Talk to their representatives about why we need to put more legislation in place to protect kids. It's really up to parents. And that's the only way, I think. And it's not as hard as you think. And I'm not trying to say like I'm a better parent because I didn't let my kid go on social media and have her phone. I'm not saying that at all. It was just impossible for me to allow her to, after I heard the stories I heard and did the research that I did. And like I said, she thanks me for it. There was a little pushback in the beginning, but she had friends. It's possible. All I'm saying is it's possible. They don't have to have this stuff. Life can go on without it and must go on without it for the protection of children until there are significant changes made at these companies.
Wow. Awesome, Nancy. So powerful. Folks who have joined us, if you have questions, throw them in. I have a couple questions that came in. Are we ready for questions, Nancy?
Sure.
All right. So in the very beginning, you mentioned lobbying against these things. I wouldn't even know where to start. Who do I even look up in my town, in my county? How do you start lobbying against this?
Well, there is a parent movement about this. And I think if you just Google, parents against social media or whatever, you're going to have, this is, the internet isn't all bad. It provides a wealth of information about these things. And I'm not exactly sure when this was from, but it's recent that parents have been urging congressional leaders in a letter to pass by the end of the year. I'm not sure if it's this year or last year. I think it's this year. 2 proposals that would force tech companies to implement stronger safety protections for children online and to take steps to safeguard their personal information. There's something called the Kids Online Safety Act that we're hoping gets passed, and there's something called the Children and Teens Online Privacy Protection Act. And just appeal to your legislator to be on board with that, with those things. Now, I don't know for sure. I haven't looked into the nitty gritty of all of these bills and whatnot, but I do know that sometimes they fall short of what really needs to be done. California, unsurprisingly, is a state where they have more protections in place for kids, especially their data. That's the other thing. Your kids' data is being, mined as well as yours. And why is this a problem? Because they will continue to promote things to your kid. Social media platforms, what are they? What are they? They're advertising companies. And they say this themselves every time they get in trouble for publishing. They say, well, we're not a publishing company. We're an advertising company. So that's why so much of what goes on social media feels like advertising and feels like self-advertising and encourages your child to see him or herself or themselves as an object to be advertised. And this is unhealthy too. But there are, I think Senator Blumenthal in New York is involved in this. I do think if you just Google your locale and your representatives and your senators and get together and start making some noise about it, I'm really shocked, actually, that, 7 years after my book came out, 10 years after I started looking into all this, and the information has only grown and grown. And I've been talking about it, and some other, prominent authors and journalists have been talking about it. I'm really surprised there isn't a bigger parent movement around social media. Because parents have a lot of political pull when they get together.
I think that's the thing, right? We have to get parents to get together.
Yes.
And to be vocal about it. Parents are vocal about a lot of things. We should be more vocal about this. So
I agree. I mean, you wouldn't want them, it's funny because I've been to households to interview kids where I see there's organic milk and organic chicken and we don't use cleaning products and, nobody smokes, but all the kids are on phones. Where is the real toxic ingredient in this household? It's right there in front of their child's face. And, another thing as parents, I get it. I was a parent. I was a single parent. So I get it. But let's face it, a lot of times social media is used as a parent. It's parenting kids, for the time. It's easy just to have the kid on a phone, right? Instead of actually having to talk with them, help them with their homework, do all the things that we need to do as parents. I know we're overstrapped. I know we have a ton of things to do. I've been there. I know how hard it is, believe me. And I did it by myself. But it's again, I'm just repeating myself, cost benefit analysis. Maybe sit down. Maybe that's a good way to talk to them about it. Teach them what a cost-benefit analysis is. Sit down and do pros and cons and get them to talk real with you about like what the cons are. Well, you know, you don't sleep as much. Are you having trouble concentrating? Remember you got cyberbullied? What about your friend Layla who got cyberbullied and you had to watch that? How did that make you feel? Do your pros and your cons. And what are they going to say? But I love TikTok. You know, of course they're going to say they love it. And of course we're going to, you know, of course they're going to say they love it and they're going to, but how is it making them really feel? Why do they love it so much? You know, I was just seeing today, I heard on some podcast or something, a woman talking about how she was on TikTok as an adult. She suddenly found herself getting so into like celebrity gossip, which she never was before, because TikTok kept giving her more and more and more celebrity gossip. You know, whatever they're looking at, they'll try and get them to look at more of it. And they often promote things to kids that they see other kids. It's algorithms looking at. And one of the things they've been promoting to kids lately, this is a whole other discussion, and although it's part of this, is these misogynistic, these celebrity misogynists like Andrew Tate. Well, he's in jail now, but do you know what I mean? There's a real growing problem with boys as young as middle school, looking at these misogynistic men who talk about, you know, women in these very degrading ways. And it's one thing to read about it in the Washington Post. It's another thing to look at it and think about your 10, 12, 14-year-old boy watching that. And I think you should look at it and see if you would like him to be looking at that.
Yep. I mean, you said it so many times tonight. These are uncomfortable conversations that you're having with adults. I think sometimes we have to have uncomfortable conversations with our kids too.
There are ways to do it though, that it's not scary. You know, there are ways to, you know, I mean, you're their parent, so you know how to talk to them. There are ways to have these conversations that are casual and I think they need to know how serious it is and how much you care about them. Really, it's all in the framework of saying, I care about you. I care about you. I care about you. And I don't want you to be harmed by this. But there's ways to say it that are not like, you know, scary like I've been being in this talk. You know, there's ways to just be conversational about it.
Yep.
And don't try and be a cool parent. They don't like that. I know. I mean, it's not cool to give them stuff that's bad for them. What if they wanted to smoke cigarettes? And that was like, it's the 1950s. It would be cool to let them, or even the 1980s. I remember in the high school that I went to, there were girls who smoked and their parents had to sign a waiver saying they could smoke in what we called the butt room. And so there were girls down there who smoked cigarettes and stuff. And, you know, my dad's cool. He lets me smoke. Oh, really? Is he that cool that he lets you smoke?
That's wild.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's what we have. You've answered everything else that's come in. And I so appreciate you taking your time, sharing this. You're clearly so passionate about it. And my kids are little and they're toddlers, but I already texted my husband, the kids aren't getting phones. So this has been fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing with us.
Thank you. Thank you for saying that. They can have flip phones. And
yes.
My daughter had a flip phone. She could text me on her flip phone. Of course, it takes a lot longer, but you can say, I'm on the bus. I'm at Sally's. I'm okay.
Yep.
Come pick me up. You can still text. And also you save a lot of money. I used to put $100 on that flip phone at the beginning of the school year, and it would last well into the summer of the next year. $100 for texting for the year. That sounds pretty good, right? You save a lot of money and you save your kids' mental health, sense of well-being and self-esteem, save them from inappropriate weirdos approaching them online, save them from the aggressive atmosphere online. One thing I hear, can I say one more thing? One thing I hear a lot from parents who come to my talks, whatever, read my book, email me. You can always email me through my website, nancyjosales.com. Ask me any question you want. I hear a lot from them, and this is good to know if you've never had a kid on social media or phone before. They say, I saw her change. I saw her change when she started using her phone and being on TikTok, and not in a good way. I saw her change. I saw her less interested in other things in real life. And I saw her focus going onto that phone and to the things happening on that phone and that screen. I saw her more cut off from us, from this family, from her siblings, even from her friends sometimes. And we know that's not good. And, you know, just because it's become so normalized doesn't mean that we can't change it. I mean, again, smoking is a sort of, you know, almost too easy comparison. But once upon a time, smoking was normalized. I mean, my mother, who's in her 80s, says that when she was in high school in the 1940s and 50s, they had cigarette machines in the cafeteria, you know, and those cigarette companies hid the data too, as we know. There's been a lot written about that, and there's been movies made about it. The cigarette companies they knew this stuff was killing people. And they knew the additives, they were not just the tobacco, but the additives that they were putting in these products were killing people. They knew, just like Facebook knew that this was affecting the health and well-being and mental health and body image of girls. They knew, they hid that. So my critique has always been of the companies, not of the parents, not of the kids, of the companies. These companies are exploiting all of us really, but especially kids. So go out there and make a revolution.